This is section 2.8, the distance and midpoint formulas, and also circles. First of all, the distance formula. If we are asked to find the distance between 2 points that are labeled x1, y1, and x2, y2, the formula for this is the distance equals the square root of, you need to make sure that square root bar goes all the way across, x2 minus x1, and then you square it. So basically you subtract your x values and then you square it. And then you subtract your y values and then you square it. Okay, this comes from the Pythagorean Theorem. Okay, so let's say I just have 2 points right here. This one's x1, y1, and this one is x2, y2. And I want to find the distance here. Well, I can always turn this into a right triangle, like this. Now, if I want to find out how far this is, then I would take my y values and I would subtract them, okay? So the way I have it written now, my y1 is the larger value, so that would be y1 minus y2, okay? The distance here is going to be the difference between your x values. And in this one, my x2 is larger than my x1, so x2 minus x1, okay? So basically, we're doing a subtraction. Subtract your x's to find out how tall the triangle is, subtract your x's to find out how far across it is. Now, we can use the Pythagorean Theorem because this is a right angle. You would take this and square it, take this and square it. And remember that it doesn't really matter what order you subtract in. If you change the order of subtraction, the only thing you change is the sign. But then when you square a negative, it becomes a positive. So it doesn't really matter what order you subtract in. So just subtract your x's, square it, subtract your y's, square it. Okay? Well, I would know, if I come back to my triangle, I would know how long this is, and then that would equal this side squared. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, a squared plus b squared, and then I get d squared, that would be the distance here, and then when you take the square root of it, both sides you get this. This comes exactly from the Pythagorean Theorem, okay? Now the midpoint formula is if I had the same line here, and I knew my endpoints, the midpoint formula is going to give me the point that cuts that line segment in half. And all you have to do is you average your x values, you add up your x's and you divide by 2, and that's going to be your new x coordinate. And then you add up your y's and divide by 2, or you just average your y values, and that becomes your y coordinate. Okay, so let's find the distance and midpoint using the formulas for here, okay? It doesn't matter what you call x1, which one of these you put your x1s with, which one you put your y1s with. So x1, y1, just make sure your 1's go together and your 2's go together. Okay. Now this distance equals is going to be the square root of, and I don't write my bar until I have everything done, just so I can make sure that everything gets written down and everything stays under that radical bar. So the first thing we do is subtract our x values. And remember, it doesn't matter what order you subtract x's in. So let's just do 8 minus 5. And then we square that, plus, now subtract your y values, 5 minus 1, and then you square that, and then we're going to take the square root of that when we're done. So this is equal to the square root of, it's going to be 3 squared plus 4 squared. So this is the square root of 9 plus 16. Which equals the square root of 25. So the distance, the length of the line that connects these 2 points is exactly 5 units. Okay, now let's find the midpoint. Okay, so if I were to draw these two, if I were to plot these 2 points and draw the line that connects them, where would my point that's exactly in the middle be? Where could I find that? Well, the midpoint is, add up your x's and then divide by 2. So your x coordinate is 5 plus 8 divided by 2. And your y coordinate, you add up your y's and then divide by 2. 1 plus 5 divided by 2. So this would be 13 halves, and that's 6 over 2, which is 3. So you could give me your point is 13 halves 3, or since this is an exact fraction, if you want to write it as 6.53, that is perfectly acceptable as well. When you're doing My Math Lab, make sure that you follow whatever directions they give you. If they want a decimal, give them a decimal. If they want the fraction, give the fraction. Okay, so let's do the same thing here. I want to find the distance, the length of the line that connects these 2 points. Okay, so this distance equals the square root of something. Okay, just subtract your x values. It doesn't matter what order you subtract in. If you want to think ahead and try to make sure you get a positive number, that's going to be great. Since I have a negative here and a negative and positive here, if I do 2 minus a negative 4 and then square that, plus subtract your y's, let's do negative 1 minus a negative 3 and square that. Okay, so this would be the same thing as, I'm writing out every step here. This is the square root of 2 plus 4 squared plus negative 1, that's going to be plus 3 squared. Take the square root of that. And this is the square root of, that's going to be 6 squared plus 2 squared is the square root of 36 plus 4, which is the square root of 40. Now the square root of 40 will simplify, and we should do that. If you do a prime factorization of 40, this is divisible by 2 to get a 20, divisible by 2 to get a 10, and 2 and a 5. It's a square root, so I'm looking for pairs. So I can pull out a 2, and then these don't have pairs, so they get multiplied back together. So this is 2 times the square root of 10. Okay, and remember your calculators will simplify these. On the TI-36X Pro, you hit second, and then square root of 40, hit enter, and it will tell you it's 2 square roots of 10. Now, the computer might ask you for a decimal approximation. Remember, on this type of calculator, you have a button right here that's hard to see, but it is a double arrow right there with a little squiggly equal sign. That's what you're going to use. You click that to get approximations. Okay? So the precise answer to the length of this line is 2 times the square root of 10. Your decimal approximation would be about 6.3, whatever they ask you to round to. Okay, so this is your distance. Let's find your midpoint. Remember, you just add your x's and then divide by 2. And it doesn't matter what order we're adding in because addition can go back and forth. We know that. So negative 4 plus 2 and divide it by 2. That's going to give me my x coordinate. And then my y coordinate is going to be negative 1 plus negative 3 divided by 2. So our midpoint here, that's going to be negative 2 over 2. And then that's negative 4 over 2. And both of those simplify. So the midpoint of the line that connects these 2 points would be negative 1, negative 2. Okay. So we're going to take all of this stuff and we're going to apply it to a circle in the next part.